Awake Radio, straight talk for the awake and aware.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 28th of November 2013. Tonight's guest is Rosa, the author of Behind the Green Mask, a number of websites up there, Democrats Against UN, Agenda 21, we're going to be going through a little bit tonight. We're constantly bombarded in the newspapers in the UK with fuel scarcity, food scarcity, the railways being privatised, all this kind of stuff. And I'll go through some of that later because this started a long time before 1992 when the Rio Summit took place. Things were going on in Britain, like the flooding of the coal mines, and I say the railways getting broken up and privatised, and now to get from one end of the country to the other is virtually, a 2-day trip, and it costs you a fortune, and that's only if there's not the wrong kind of snow on the line or the wrong kind of leaves or something. But anyway, Rosa Corey's on the line from California, and I will slow down my speaking so she can understand clearly enough, I hope. Welcome to the broadcast, Rosa.
Well, I'm so glad to be with you. Thank you.
Well, as I do with all guests, I tend to let them introduce themselves because I'll invariably get something wrong. So if you want to just explain how you came across Agenda 21, quickly as well, people like that, smart meters you have on the site, and just say what's, how it kind of struck you that something wasn't quite right with it.
Well, I would say I'm a little bit unusual in that my first information regarding United Nations Agenda 21 came through my experience as a government appraiser. I was for 30 years a district branch chief for the California Department of Transportation and an expert witness in land use and land valuation. And in around the year 2002, I in going into planning departments around the San Francisco Bay Area and checking on land value and land use, I saw that there was a planning revolution going on. That, in fact, when I was going into these government offices, it looked as if they were considering that what they were there for was to stop people from using their land. And in looking into this, I found that that was the case, that, in fact, restrictions and regulations were making it nearly impossible for people to use their property and to build on their property. And from there, I checked into around the United States, and I found that it was not just in the San Francisco Bay Area, that it was all over the country. And then, of course, doing my research later, I found that it's international. From there, I looked behind it, and I found the United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, which in the United States, if you even talk about it, you're considered to be a conspiracy theorist or a nut. Up until very recently, the press even denied that it existed. But it does exist. It's a United Nations program that is a non-binding agreement that was agreed to in 1992 by 179 nations, including the UK, and the United States. And basically what it is it's the inventory and control plan that inventories all land, water, minerals, plants, animals, construction, means of production, energy, education, information, and human beings in the world. This is an inventory and control plan that includes all surveillance, manipulation, and of course that extends to smart meters, control of energy. And so through doing my research, of course, I wrote a book called Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. And also We provide information on our websites, and we are suing to stop a huge regional plan here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which, of course, is the same plan that you'll find all across the world, a plan to regionalize, because without globalization just being imposed immediately, there needs to be an interim step. And regionalization is the interim step to full globalization. And we are seeing that interim step being implemented all across the world right now.
Well, of course, we go back to what you said there about politicians denying knowledge. I was on a radio in Ireland when I used to live over there, and there was a Green councillor on, and he was talking about environmental stuff, and I just called in and said, are you aware that you're talking about Agenda 21? And he denied all knowledge of it, and he said, I'd be more than interested in getting some more information on that. I said, well, just go to your council because you signed up for it. You must know about it, you know. And he kind of went a bit quiet. He said, I've not heard of it. You know, can you send me some stuff? So of course I sent him a load of documents, including the actual Agenda 21 document, and never heard another word, of course. But the radio host said, yeah, I'd be most interested in that as well, and we'll have you back on. But of course that never happened either. But again, go back to what you're saying. I mean, people who actually, they know a bit about Agenda 21, think it's all about just control of the countryside and putting people into the cities and all the rest of it. They don't actually realise that it's control of everything. And you say there's surveillance state cameras, water, energy. They don't actually realise how pervasive this is, and it's going to come down to even what they have in Scotland is a system called GovVec, which is getting it right for every child. Where every child born in Scotland now has a social worker allocated to them, and they have access to your child at any time of the day or night to your home. You can't deny them access, and that's how far gone it is in Scotland, which is possibly the most communist government in the European Union, because they're part of it as well, although they deny it. But so that's how far gone it is already in Scotland.
Yeah.
With only one police force to cover the whole country as well. It's all becoming United Nations policy. That's who's running Scotland. But, the water, energy, all of it is. I don't know what the state of privatisation is in the States. I mean, do you have all these utilities privatised over there?
This is the job that is moving forward is full privatization, where it suits the government. And we're seeing this, my favorite privatization, and I say that satirically, is, prisons, private prisons. Because of course, fascism is what privatization, combination of governmental agencies combining with corporations to create these sort of public-private partnerships that are, ostensibly they're there because government can't do it by itself, but really the reason for them is so that of course, those of us who are taxpayers will foot the bill for these projects that then are often low oversight, that are used as revolving doors for elected officials, that do not allow for any transparency because they're run by private corporations. And of course, on the prison issue, which I find to be extremely important, because much of what we're doing now is being criminalized and more things are being considered to be crimes. For instance, what you were just talking about with getting it right for every child, if you refuse to allow access to your child, you're committing a crime. And so with more and more things becoming crime, then there's a need for more prisons. And this is what drives this is being driven by private prison operators, because they need more criminals and they need longer sentences. All of this everything is Agenda 21 now. I'd like to say that it's not what is United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. It's what isn't. And you're going to have to look long and hard for anything that isn't Agenda 21 now. Because besides alternative media, and the resistance, there's very little that isn't Agenda 21 right now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the private prisons, of course, private business, these customers, and, we're being lined up as the customers because, when the Lisbon Treaty was signed over, in Ireland, when I was there at the time and saw how, rigged that vote was, blatantly, there was something like 91,000 new laws came into operation. Now, nobody knows what those laws are. They're just, you can't possibly know if you're committing a crime. I'm probably committing a crime right now talking to you. I don't know.
Yes, you are. I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
That's right. In fact, I see them right now.
Well, I'm quite happy to be a criminal then, in that context. So I mean, the private prisons, and you've got to wonder what kind of people are going to be working in those private prisons because we were at the recent.
I'm glad to have a job. This is part of what happens with destroying our economy,
Of course, and I was discussing this earlier with another radio host who's actually going to be on after me tonight on here for the first time. We were talking about I've lost the train of thought now. Where were we? Prisons. The prison card mentality is going to come in, and as you say, people are desperate for jobs, and they will do anything to keep those jobs. And unfortunately, these are going to be low-paid, possibly low-empathy kind of individuals, and they'll be trained in such a way that there'll be no doubt that they know where the paycheck's coming from, and they better do as they're told, and act accordingly. We were. Yeah, I mean, this goes into all walks of life. It's not just the prisons. I mean, the police in the UK are now being privatised. They've been you have this kind of public-private thing going on, although it's not called that. We have G4S, who, when I was younger, were actually losing prisoners out of the back of their vans, on a regular basis, and stacks of money. Well, I don't know if they lost it or just gave it to some of their friends, but those people have now been, they're now bidding to run prisons and detention centres and places like that. And funnily enough, they're also putting in a contract to actually print our money. It's quite bizarre. The company that lost prisoners and lost money on a regular basis are now going to be in charge of printing stuff and looking after the prisoners.
That's one of the things that is a watchword of United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. If it doesn't make sense to you, it's Agenda 21. And part of what's happening is the crafting of the new mind now. And this is why education is such a vital part of this plan, and why it's so, bringing up that getting it right for every child in Scotland, having a social worker for every child, responsibility transferring from the family to the state. This is part of developing a new human being and crafting the new mind. So what we're doing is also crafting the new morality or immorality and the loss of ethics. It's situational ethics. It depends on whatever your situation is, what your ethical issues will be, and how you'll respond to them. And so, of course, this is essential to developing a sort of unempathetic workforce that is determined to take care of itself, because this is what austerity is about: creating total dependence on government and a loss of independence across the world. This is why this is a land use plan as well, because it moves us off of the land where we can be independent and into the highly dense cities where we can, where we're dependent on government and other entities for services, and where you can effectively recreate yourself, reinvent yourself. If you report your neighbor for something, you can just move a block away and no one's going to know you there. So it allows for full anonymity where necessary, and also allows for a sort of a sense of loss of community. And the whole plan is dependent on the illusion that it creates community, but that's a lie. And in fact destroys community, it destroys tradition, and it destroys culture. And that's an essential part of it.
Yeah, I lived in Ireland for a number of years, and I lived out in the countryside. And there was one road in and one road out, the same road, and there was grass up in the middle of it. So I mean that shows you how remote it was. And in the winter you got stuck there for a couple of weeks. But I was surrounded by farmers, and I had quarter of an acre planted out with any type of vegetable I could plant. I had my own water supply, my own weeds, polytunnel, all that stuff. And I had a farmer look over the fence one day and say to me, "Oh, that's a good crop of potatoes, you know." And I started talking about Agenda 21, and he had no idea what it was. And I said, "Well, what are you going to do when they come to you and tell you you have to plant genetically modified potatoes? You know, because Ireland is famous for its potatoes, apparently." And he said, "Oh, that'll never happen. That's against God, all this stuff." And I said, "Well, what's God got to do with it? We're talking about, the European Union. They don't believe in God, you know." And he said, well, that'll never happen." I said, "Well, how do you get your subsidies?" And he said, "Oh, well, that paperwork," and he started going on about that. I said, "Well, what are you going to do when they come in and tell you if you don't plant genetically modified potatoes, you ain't getting your subsidy?" He says, "Oh, I'll give it up." I says, "Give up?" I says, "Give up what?" He says, "I'll give up farming." I says, "Well, that's exactly what they want." And nobody around me was growing anything. I was a city boy living in the country. And no farmers were actually growing anything to eat. I met them in the shops occasionally. They were in the supermarket. It's quite bizarre. Like farmers who can't grow food. But, and all the children, the sons and daughters had moved off, and they were doing, they'd gone to college or they'd gone to the cities, just to get work. And again, that's another factor, that's been put in there to break the family, cycle of regular farming. And I can't remember who actually said it. It's somebody in the UN, I think, said that farming was too important to be left to farmers. But I can't remember who said it, but that says it all, really. I mean, with every intention of taking over agriculture, and when a private organisation like the United Nations takes over control of the food supply, then we're in real trouble. And I know in America, in many cases that have been reported, that the police with drawn weapons have gone into organic farms and made them destroy crops and things like that. I don't know how regular that actually is in America. Maybe it's on a bigger scale than I know, but I've only heard about it on kind of small independent growers. But is that something that's quite prevalent in the States at the moment?
Well, I think that the issue, when you look at what's considered to be unsustainable, this is Agenda 21 is the action plan. It's the blueprint to implement sustainable development worldwide. And sustainable development was defined in 1987 by the World Commission on Environment and Development, the United Nations, as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And, this sounds really cool because, of course, nobody wants to screw up the future for their children and grandchildren or themselves. But then the UN did say, well, okay, yes, everything we're doing now does indeed compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And what are we going to do about it? And that was what, and that was in 87, and that was what Agenda 21 was to do. It is the action plan, the blueprint to implement sustainable development worldwide. And so the idea of what's unsustainable is considered to be unsustainable to have livestock because they release too many greenhouse gas emissions, methane, and it's private homes, private vehicles, tillage. If you're going to talk about farming, if you're dragging a plow across the dirt, you're releasing too many greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to use seed injecting machines in order to grow. And in fact, the goal for growing is to leave the land out in the countryside alone for the animals and to move everyone into these dense city centers and grow food in sort of parking structure type things, concrete, multi-story buildings where the food is grown hydroponically. This is the goal. This plan is dependent on on technology. It's actually a sort of a technocratic bureaucracy plan. And it's conspiratorial, but it involves millions of people who are participating in this plan, whether they have partial knowledge or no knowledge of it at all. And so it might involve all of our government officials, planners. The UK, if you want to look at the United Nations plan, at the United Kingdom plan for Agenda 21, as they had agreed to it and made their plans known on the United Nations website, we have access to that information on our Post Sustainability Institute website, where it says which nations agreed to Agenda 21. And we have a link there that'll show you what the UK made a commitment for. And also, the plan is a global plan, but it's implemented locally. And every nation has a local Agenda 21 policy, every country. So, the UK, of course, has this policy. But the plan, was to assist these countries in implementing Agenda 21 by, creating, a non-governmental organization called ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. That was created in 1990 before Agenda 21 was agreed to in June of 92. And in the UK, you've got 9, this is a membership organization for governmental agencies, mainly for cities, to be a part of. And the plan that ICLEI implements is essentially a jurisdictional breaking plan. So what it does is it gives power to local, entities, but this power is illusionary. What it does really is it breaks national jurisdictional boundaries, national state jurisdictional boundaries, so that you can have an EU, because it facilitates the implementation of huge megacities like London, like that, but beyond the city limits itself, it's mega regions. So in the UK, you've got 9 members of this international organization, which now calls itself Local Governments for Sustainability, so that you won't realize that it's international. And Aberdeen, Birmingham, Bristol, something in Wales, I can't say it, Glasgow, Greater London, Newcastle, Woking, and a couple of others are all members of the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, whose entire purpose is to implement the United Nations Agenda 21 worldwide.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, I know for a fact that Glasgow is cited as being one of the smart cities. So they're really rolling out the smart meter technology, the Wi-Fi, all the redevelopment is high tech, for, as I say, sustainable development. But there's still a lot of, very dense, housing in Glasgow, and tower blocks and stuff like that. And, we'll come back and talk about the planning things that are going on in the UK, after appropriately the first tune of the night called High Rise.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
You see what sending out the negative waves did, Moriarty?
But Oddball, I did try and tell them, but they won't listen. I tried.
Sure.
But I did try.
Oh, man. Don't hit me with them negative waves so early in the morning.
But I can't force them to listen. I can't.
Always with the negative waves, Moriarty. Always with the negative waves. Have a little faith, baby. Have a little faith.
But I keep trying. Oddball, I keep trying. But they won't listen. They won't tune in. They really won't.
Why don't you knock it off with them negative waves? Why don't you dig how beautiful it is out here? Why don't you say something righteous and hopeful for a change?
Tune in to Awake Radio for your positive waves.
Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio on the 28th of November 2013, and it's 25 to 9 in the PM in the UK. I just want to mention Alan Taylor Shearer, who's starting broadcasting on Awake Radio at 10 PM tonight till 12. Alan has his own radio broadcast, which he does 2 or 3 times a week. And he's going to carry on this conversation about Agenda 21 and a number of other issues later on. So I'm going to hand over to him. Stay on the line and have a listen to what he's got to say. Rosa, in the Earth Charter and all the rest of it, Kyoto came out in 1992 with that criminal Morris Strong, who's hiding out in China. The things that were happening in the UK in the early 80s were obviously prior to that by a long way, decade at least. We had Margaret Thatcher, who, instigated the miners' strike with the help of the unions and Arthur Scargill on one side and blah, blah, blah. Controlled opposition to create havoc, split up families, split up villages, communities, and those family rivalries still continue to this day. It's quite amazing, and even up in Scotland as well. If you go through some of these villages where basically the only employment was around the coal mines, with all the shops and everything in the village all benefiting from it. Margaret Thatcher came in, instigated the miners' strike, destroyed the mining industry, and then proceeded to flood the mines. Now, when you flood the mine, you're basically putting it out of any use whatsoever. So, that was industrial sabotage by the supposedly elected Prime Minister of Britain. I would call it treason, to be honest. But, those mines are out of use today, and the latest figure I heard was that we have between 300 and 400 years of coal still under the ground that we can't use anymore because we can't get to it. But I'm sure the technology is there to pump them out and start again and start actually employing people to get it out and stop killing our pensioners during the winter. But we won't do that, of course. But this goes along with what's happening now in terms of coal mines. All the coal-powered electricity generating stations are being shut down because of EU legislation to stop greenhouse gases and all the rest of it, despite the fact that modern power plants fired by coal are quite clean, and that we're actually paying through our taxes to get really dirty ones built in China. At the count of was it 1 a week or something they're building over there, and no controls over emissions whatsoever. But also what happened here back in the 80s, it might even have started in the 70s, was the privatisation of the rail network. Mm-hmm. And again, this public-private partnerships. So, if the trains don't run on time, it's not the government's fault. You need to speak to the railway companies. And of course you speak to them and say, well, they can't tell you that. That's a private business matter. Mm-hmm. So, they privatised all the rail networks, but they didn't just privatise the train companies and the carriages and the coaches and all the rest of it. They actually privatised different sections of railway lines. So if you want to get from one end of Britain to the other, you're probably going through 5 or 6 different companies and buying 5 or 6 different tickets from different sources. And if one of those links on your trip doesn't work, then you don't get to where you're going. Of course, if you're dealing with 6 companies, you've got six people looking for profit off you instead of just the one. And again, it's you mentioned austerity earlier on, and austerity is only a term that's ever used in warfare before. So you've got to ask the question: is the war on the people? Well, of course it is.
Oh, no question about that. That's true. Yeah,
we are the victims, that's for sure. But what's happening now is I don't know if people in Britain would be aware of the amount of roadworks on the motorways, and particularly down here on the M25. There's been roadworks on there for years, and I don't know if you've read the M25, the ring road around London. And basically, I thought a long time ago when they were building that's a barrier, And sure enough, now if you drive inside the M25, you have a congestion charge. And I was looking at a trip on one of the sites to do a journey down to the south of London, just outside south of London, and to drive through London was going to cost £10 in a congestion charge. That was more than the fuel was going to cost me. You know, and of course you're paying carbon tax on the fuel as well. So
this is. Go ahead.
Carry on. No, carry on.
Well, the point of obviously reducing our mobility is an essential part of this plan. And of course the plan itself, it didn't just start in 1992. What that is it's the codification, it's the formalization of the plan, and it's a blueprint, it's a guideline, it is the action plan. So, but of course the plan, you can look back in the 1970s, limits to growth by the Club of Rome, that actually had a lot of us who were baby boomers just deciding not to have children, zero population growth. And then taking it back before that into the Fabian socialists in the 1880s. But this is, of course, it's a plan to, to reduce the mobility and independence of the proles. And, through, obviously energy is a vital, an essential part of our ability to survive and to thrive because all industry is dependent on, energy. So in, restricting, coal, and here in the United States, besides that, we had, and I'm sure you've seen that there, were not only, it's funny where you bring up Maggie Thatcher because that was when I had a revelation. I remember as a young feminist looking at Maggie Thatcher and going, nope, it doesn't matter what your gender is. It's not like women are going to be so cool. But the idea that you can destroy industries and literally create a future of major poverty for huge sections of your country, like was done here with the lumber industry. And of course it's happening with coal as well. So this is about, restricting your ability to move freely, to move independently, and also to charge you, mobility pricing and access pricing, so that you end up giving up your private vehicle, so that you realize that if you're living out in the suburbs, you're going to be charged more, you're going to be taxed, you're going to be regulated, your access to water, to energy, to all of your services is going to be limited. You might have your well monitored if you're out in a rural area. You'll have your roads pulverized and turned to gravel, as they're doing in my county. I live in a rural county. It's the wine country. In California, and they have announced that of our 1,384 miles of county roads, they only intend to pave 150 miles. So that means that over 1,000 miles of roads just in this county will be pulverized and turned to gravel. There's no money supposedly for maintenance. In the United States, as well as other places, money for maintenance on infrastructure goes to highly urban areas. And this is directly, because of Agenda 21, because the idea is it's sustainable to move you out of the rural and suburban areas into the high density city centers where you can be more easily managed, surveilled, and controlled. So, especially you'll see the building styles changing now where, they're more urban. They'll be built right to the edge of the sidewalk in the city centers with the ground floor retail, and then above that, the residential apartments and condos above that. What that means is that when you're built right to the edge of the sidewalk, you literally have no place to hide when you're out in the street. There's very little private space for individuals, unlike when you're in the suburbs or in the country and you've got your yard, your back area. In this way, you're going to be more easily watched. The idea for high density development in the city centers is directly called more eyes on the street. More eyes. In other words, everyone will be then the police. Everyone will be watching what goes on in the street. And in addition to that, the idea is that under Agenda 21, urban areas are islands of human habitation, which means that the idea is that human beings will then be in islands of urbanity, of urban development. And if you're out in the suburbs or you're out in the rural areas, you over the years, between now and approximately 2050, when this is all supposed to be rolled up completely, you'll be moved into the city centers through, as I said, whether you lose your ability to move freely through, loss of paved roads or, no services out there, or your well is being monitored or, whatever. And then you're moved into the city center where you can't afford to drive a vehicle, so you're dependent on that public transportation that does not take you where you want to go. This is all part of this plan.
Yeah, and we have, I mentioned the privatisation of the railways, but what's been proposed now is that, and I mentioned the M25 and all the roadworks that have been going on there for years. The roads are now to be privatised, and of course, the Rothschilds have stepped in and said, "Oh, we'll do that. We'll do that." What a coincidence.
Yeah.
And we have a thing over here, I don't know if you have them, called average speed cameras. Now, the theory behind these is that you can just go a little bit over the speed limit and, you'll be alright, and as long as you don't, speed for too long and all the rest of it, you'll be okay if you stick to, on the average length of that journey, you stick to that speed limit, which I have. It's generally about 50 miles an hour here. Of course, that just means you can speed for half the journey and go half the speed for the second half, so it's got nothing to do with road safety. Or you could stop, you could stop the car at the side of the road for 5 minutes and then speed off again. So, I mean, logically it makes no sense whatsoever. But what this is about is these cameras are going to be, all over the country. And basically, I sussed this out quite a number of years ago when I got my first smartphone and I had a GPS thing on it. And, the nature of my work, I have to find certain houses and stuff like that. So I would use it for that. And, it would give me the time that I was going to get to that location. And then I sussed out that, because I was speeding, I got there early and before I knew it. So, when the cash goes, you're going to get fined directly through your mobile phone or your GPS tracking system, whatever. So that's where the average speed cameras are going to come in, because, they're going to stretch the distances that these are apart. And, at the moment, it's the longest one I've seen is about 5 or 6 miles, at a stretch. But these are going to be rolled out for like 100 miles, 200 miles. And you have no idea what your average speed is going to be over that length or that distance. So, invariably, you're going to get a fine for breaking the speed limit. But, unless you stop for coffee halfway, I suppose, and then just dash off.
And then you have to check in. Yeah. Monitor that.
Yeah. So, But what they also did here a number of years ago was they introduced a scrappage scheme, and they did this in Ireland as well at the same time, which meant that if you had the kind of outlawed old cars and said, "Oh, they're bad for the environment," although the real reason for it is you could actually repair them, they didn't have electronics in them, and that's why I've got a 1994 Volkswagen Passat, because you can still get parts for it and from the scrapyards at the moment, but it doesn't have a computer in it. But they introduced the scrappage scheme, and of course, people fell for it and thought, "Oh, I can get rid of my old car. I'll get £1,000 for it, and I can buy something half decent, So they went along, they got the finance, and now they've lost the job, and the car's been taken off them, so they've ended up with no car. So, and the other thing they brought in around the same time was they're still trying to introduce it. They've got hybrids, the electric cars, and I've seen some petrol stations have got 1 or 2 power points to charge this thing up. And I was speaking to another greenie on some radio program, and I was saying to him, I can only get figures here for what it's going to take. It takes 20 minutes to charge this car up to 80%. Now, we all know that batteries, once they get below a certain level, they lose their power fairly quickly. And I thought, well, why can't I get figures for 100%? I think if it takes 20 minutes for 80%, it's probably going to take at least, half an hour for 100%. And it only got you 50 miles. So, I mean, how long is it going to take you to, like, a 200 or 300 mile trip? It's just bizarre. And what also struck me was that the size of the car parks you would need at the petrol stations would be huge. If your car's parked and lined up for half an hour at a time to get charged up. So that was another thing.
Well, the idea is that you're not going to, citizen, you're not going to need to go anywhere. because essentially in the future, and not too distant future, this is the plan, is that whatever whatever you're going to go buy or do, wherever it is you think you're headed to, is exactly the same as wherever you came from. So there's really no justification for going anywhere. And that, that's the goal. Besides the fact that, destroying those vehicles, that's not just happening with vehicles. The plan is also to destroy appliances that have, the old appliances that have, don't have smart chips in them that relate to your smart meter. And by the way, don't ever trust anything called smart, right? What's happening now is that there are plans to buy up old appliances and destroy them as well. So you literally have no way of avoiding, unless you make your own ice box or whatever, avoiding this kind of surveillance, and also fines, penalties, fees, and taxes, because that is the new economy. And then so this all entirely relates to managing, monitoring, inventory, and controlling all of us. And the thing that I see, of course, all around the world is that people voluntarily do this stuff, like you said, whether it's a few bucks that they're going to get, or whether it's the idea that, it's a cool new piece of electronics that they want to, like a smartphone or something. Or now here in the United States, and I don't know if this is elsewhere as well, there you can actually pay to have your house, the interior of your house, surveilled. Supposedly, and this is through your cable company, supposedly because you want to see if your daughter or son came home from school on time, you want cameras inside your house. But, obviously it's because you want to see if your husband's cheating on you with someone else. But, the reality is that, the cable company keeps your interior, video for at least a year and probably never gets rid of it. You only have access to it for 30 days. So these are things that people are voluntarily doing, carrying a GPS device with them at all times, or, allowing themselves to go along with these plans because they're, promoted as being cool or, something that is desirable. But in fact, people really need to stand up and speak out and refuse to go along with these plans. This is the only thing that we're going to be able to do is, as a unified force across the world, resist.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a final note on the cars, something the European Union brought out earlier this year. They're proposing a ban on anybody putting a non-specific manufacturer's part on their car. So you can't even replace, and they're also going after the scrapyards here, and shutting them down as well, supposedly for taking illegal metal and stuff like that off of people. But it's basically about destroying anybody's ability who's a bit handy with cars. And there's a couple of guys, the producers actually, quite a petrol head, and somebody else in the chat box on the site there. It's about stopping anybody repairing the vehicle if it's an old one, and like you say, getting a smart car. Because every car's going to be smart in the future. We're not going to have a choice over that. And going back to we'll go to another piece of music in a minute, but going back to the surveillance in the house where people pay for it, I don't know if you've seen the movie Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they had that there. You were actually involved in the television that was on that book was written back in the 30s, and they talked about plasma TV screens covering a whole wall. And in the movie, it shows you them actually interacting with the soap opera, and that's the way it's going. We've already got X Factor and Teen Idol and whatever other idol people want to worship, and people are interacting with that via telephone or whatever on the internet. But it's going to come directly into your home, and as in 1984, where a central character is forced to do his exercises before he goes to work. That's where we're heading. With all this stuff. And, again, people are quite happy to pay for it, which is quite bizarre. But there you go. We'll go to another piece of music. I'm not sure what it is, because, Steve's probably off talking about cars again. I don't know. But, there'll be another piece of music coming up in a second. He'll cut in and say, you're off here, lads. But, we're not off here yet. But yeah, the transport thing is certainly being clamped down on here. And once the Rothschilds get hold of the roads over here and they start putting in the tolls, then basically we won't be able to afford to go anywhere. Never mind the price of fuel. Over here, I mean, I know Americans complain about paying. I don't know what's that a gallon of fuel over there now.
Oh, it's like $4.50.
$4.50.
Yeah, for a gallon.
Yeah, well, over here it's getting close to £6.50.
Yeah.
So and there's no let up. We're told this is all to do with wars in the Middle East and scarcity and all the rest of it, but it's utter nonsense. And as I say, they're going after trucks now. They're going to ban trucks from city centres, so that's going to put haulage companies out of business because they have to get rid of the trucks and then replace them with pizza vans. And all small vans in Britain now are going to be legislated that they can only drive at 50 miles an hour. So again, they're going to delay the delivery of essential things like food and things to shops, and I think we're going to see empty shelves starting to appear very shortly in this country. I've got a little article. I've spoken about food banks before, and we'll come on to that because that's all part of it, of course. And talking about starvation, the next track is "I Want to Live." You're listening to Reality Bytes Radio. So our guest Rosa with us, and we were talking up there about how this is a global agenda and the things that are happening, and we've got a number of things to talk about. As I've mentioned here before, I've got some experience in Eastern Europe, and I've seen what's happened there over the past nearly a decade now. In terms of as Rosa was talking about the destruction or obsolescence of old technology and replaced by new so-called smart technology. This is all being rolled out with smart meters at the same time. And I also want to talk about what's happening in the agriculture sector over there as well, because that's very, very rapidly forcing people out of the villages and into the cities for work, basically because they've been prevented from feeding themselves when they were perfectly sustainable before. But Rosa, you were talking about Serbia before the break there. I've only actually driven through Serbia, but what I have seen, I've seen the petrol stations getting thrown up everywhere, with Shell and Lukoil is the one I was trying to remember. That's a big Russian company. Shell and Lukoil in particular are throwing up petrol stations like there's absolutely no shortage of oil, which of course there isn't. If there was, they wouldn't be doing it. So, and the roads over there are pristine. The motorways through Serbia, although they are tolled, but you don't pay road tax there. You pay your toll, and you can take your choice. You can go the back roads or not. But obviously, the toll roads are the quicker ones, as they've been designed to be. And once you're on them, you can't get off them really, and you have to pay the price at the end, which you're not really sure of what it is until you get there. It could change from one day to the next. You might get there and not have enough money one day and be sent back. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what you've seen in Serbia, as I say, I've only seen the road infrastructure and what's happening there. I've never actually spent any time such in Belgrade or something, but I've driven through Belgrade, and that's getting massive redevelopment as well, and it's all modern, high-tech stuff that's going in after they bombed it conveniently. So what have you seen happen in that part of the world?
Well, just like across the world, I mean, as I said, 179 nations agreed to United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. And of course, if you just look at that document, this is one of the reasons I called my book Behind the Green Mask, because the Agenda 21 document itself is kind of a green mask, because it talks about, it's got some really pretty thoughts in it about capacity building, which means bringing up the lesser developed nations so that they'll be able to afford to purchase goods from that are produced cheaply by cheap labor. The thing to know about Agenda 21 is that it is a globalization plan, and globalization is the standardization of all systems. So what that means is that whether you're an educational system or law enforcement or transportation or food production or whatever it is, your laws will be harmonized across the world because this is a corporatocracy being developed, and all mega corporations want cheap labor. They want infrastructure that is paid for by either taxpayers or by grants from the IMF, and they want free and open regulations and open transportation. So essentially, they want to remove all borders, and they want a mobile workforce, and a workforce that is trained specifically to do with the tasks that mega corporations need. Rather than getting an actual education, you'll just be trained to do what it is that mega corporations are looking for. So what happens, of course, Eastern Europe is these are countries that were dependent on subsidies, on handouts. Now they're lesser developed nations. They're being developed through a lot of infrastructure cronyism, a lot of corporatization that is benefiting from government grants, and there's a lot of corruption. In fact, that Danube region, one thing, of course, I just said that you're going to see your national borders basically erased. They'll stay in place like they are in the EU, but they'll be irrelevant. So the world is being developed and devolved into regions rather than into nations. So again, this destroys culture, it destroys tradition, and it destroys your ability to influence what happens politically in your area because your vote has zero impact on what it is that's happening. So in the Danube region, of course, Serbia is part of the Danube region, which is an official, sort of quasi-official region that involves countries all the way from Czech Republic down to Serbia. That border on the Danube. This is, they're creating, clusters now across the world that are, basically being developed as, information clusters or development clusters where, money will then be invested. And, it requires, of course, media manipulation and educational manipulation to move people, into these areas so that they can be low-cost wage workers for these new plans, and so that their governments will literally be jumping for whatever handouts that they can get from either non-governmental organizations or foundations or grants from more developed nations. So this is what's happening in Eastern Europe. The world is being leveled. This is the point of globalization, so that the more developed nations are actually, you'll find that your funding to the lesser developed nations is directly related to this plan to reduce your ability to be independent, to raise your unemployment level. So, like Spain and Spain and Greece are like over 50% for youth unemployment. And, of course, Ireland. So what this does is it creates this mobile workforce that's not connected to any particular location. It destroys your national boundaries. It destroys your ability to react as a cultural, united force. And it also affects your ability to maintain yourself, as an individual. And instead, it opens up these areas which are, developed as infrastructure and financing cultures and clusters so that they can be exploited by the mega corporations. This is a corporatocracy. It's a totalitarian state being erected worldwide. This is the goal, is to have, total dependence, total loss of employment, complete dependence on electronic devices so that you can be manipulated through your emotions, and less intellectual development so that you do not question these things that are going on.
Well, absolutely. And then talking about Eastern Europe, I'll mention the country I know more about is Bulgaria, although I've been up in Romania as well. But in Bulgaria, in terms of the agriculture, I've mentioned this on air before, so I'm sorry for boring listeners, but What they've done there over the past year and a half to 2 years, they've gone after the bees. Because, every second house, I mean, to explain to listeners, I've never done this before, but in Bulgaria, you have the cities where they have the old Soviet tower blocks, with the numbers on the side, and they look absolutely horrendous from the outside, but inside they're like any kind of modern home we have here. But they do look horrendous on the outside, but people actually own them. When I first started going, unfortunately nobody had a mortgage. Everybody owned the property because when the Soviet Union pulled out, the only thing they could actually do, the Bulgarian government, was actually give them the homes, because it was in such chaos. So, people didn't have mortgages, and one of the towns I was in, there was only, I think, 2 or 3 banks at that time, and now there must be about 25 to 30, all of them mortgages and credit cards and all the rest of it. And going back to what I said about the electrical stores offering credit, it's all becoming, they're creating that bubble, that debt bubble for people. The trap to fall into. But what they're doing in the villages is that they've gone after the bees, and this is European legislation, of course, and they said that you can't keep bees within 300 metres of a dwelling, because apparently after thousands of years it says become dangerous all of a sudden to have bees in your back garden. So the people who don't have any land, they've sold it. Everybody, going back to what I said about being given the houses, every village house was given attractive land at the same time, surrounding the village they lived in. And this would probably be, 2,000 or 3,000 square metres. It'd be a fairly substantial tract of land where the food's grown up to feed themselves. But gradually, the big corporations have come in, and you'll drive between villages there now, and you'll see the signs up for all the big agricultural companies at the side of the road, growing the crops and stuff. And I'm sure some of it's genetically modified. They say they're not doing genetically modified stuff there yet, but I'm sure they are. So they've already destroyed a lot of the indigenous beekeepers. And I was over there, and I went to one of the bigger suppliers in one of the villages over there, after scouring some of the supermarkets over here and seeing how much they were charging for them acacia honey. And I knew people that did that over there, and I went to them and said, well, how much can you give me? And he said, well, how much do you want? And he said, I'll give you 100 kilos, 1,000 kilos, whatever you want. He says, but I cannot give you the paperwork to export it. I says, why not? He says, because the European Union gave all the quotas to the mafia.
Huh.
So the local beekeepers have to sell all the honey to these criminal gangs at the price that they decide. Or they can't sell it. It can't go anywhere. They're just stacking it up. And the European Union legislation says that you're only allowed to import 1 kilo of honey for your own good, because apparently it's dangerous. GCHQ, if you're listening and you want to stop me the next time at Dover, I regularly bring in 25 kilos. And if you want to buy some, it'll be very cheap. But, it's, that's going on. And now they're going after they've already gone after the chickens and the ducks and the geese. When I first started going over there, there was geese, ducks, chickens just walking about the village streets. You had to avoid them in your car. They were everywhere. And donkeys as well, because we used a lot of donkeys, to get them back and forward on the land. They got rid of the donkeys, basically, by, saying that they were danger on the road. When they've been there for, 100 years they've been using donkeys, since the cars started coming in. They've still been using them, but, instead of just saying, okay, at night time you've got to put lights on the back of your trailer or whatever, they say, no, donkeys are banned after dark. So basically, people, it takes a long time to get from your house to your land. Maybe it takes you a couple of hours with a donkey. Now that the fact that they can't come back after dark means it shortens the time they can work on the land, so they can produce less food. Also, they've started, they put up the price of banned certain chicken feeds and stuff like that, and they brought in the genetically modified stuff, which is too expensive for the villagers to buy. So now when I go over, all I see now are the occasional little flock of geese here and there, and a few chickens, but the villagers can't afford the feed to give to the poultry. So that's gone, and now they're going after the pigs. because basically every house used to have a pig, and a female pig, and they would breed that, and they would get the piglets off it. They would eat the sow at Easter with a big festival, and they'd eat a lot of pigs. And then they'd carry on like that through the year and grow their own pork and salt it and store it and keep it. But now that's now been deemed after thousands of years to be unhealthy as well. They're not allowed to have them near the house. So that's that. As I say, they've gone after the electricity, the private electricity companies that come and started charging for meters, where they never did before. So now people can't afford to pay electricity bills. The water, again, the water meters there. That's not too expensive at the moment, but the price for petrol it's only at best 10% cheaper than it is here in the UK. But the average wage over there is at least 10 times less than it is over here. So that's relatively expensive. And again, European legislation, which I'm not sure if that should come in yet, but they've certainly proposed it, that you cannot keep seeds unless they're approved by the European Union. So they're going to stop them even saving the seeds off their own crops. And also, what proves the lie that warmer temperatures will cause food shortages in Bulgaria in particular, and many other parts of Eastern Europe. In the summertime, it gets to 45 degrees, sometimes close to 50, in July, August, September. And in the winter, it can drop as low as minus 30. But when you go over in the summer, there's food everywhere. Every garden's booming with food. Every field is full. So anybody that believes 1 or 2 degrees increase in the UK is going to destroy all the crops is an idiot, basically. Anybody that's been in an airplane and flown across Europe will see food everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. If you go to Africa, you go below the equator, there's food everywhere. And, even the United Nations has said that Africa could feed the world. So why are they starving? Well, it's Agenda 21, isn't it? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And there's a quote here from George Bernard Shaw, which I spoke briefly about this maniac last week, who of course was a founding member of the Fabian Society, which you mentioned earlier. And he said that you must all know half a dozen people at least who are of no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put them there and say, now, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organisation of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't give very much use to yourself. Now, over here in the UK, we have David Cameron's Big Society, and the phrase big organisation of society tells you all you need to know about what the big society is. And that quote comes from 1934, I think it is. I mean, and I mentioned last week as well, H.G. Wells had written about carbon and energy being the new currency in the future back in the 1920s. So I mean, this is not a new idea. I mean, this is just coming to fruition. And again, Eastern Europe is now being targeted, and that's why they brought them into the European Union. Of course, was to get the land off them, because it is so fertile and not being, it's not being poisoned with man-made fertilizers and chemical fertilizers. They use the donkeys, the pigs, the chickens to use the manure and the horses and all the rest of it to fertilize the land. And they were very healthy people at one time. And I speak to colleagues over there now, and there are literally chemists every 100 meters, 200 meters in the cities. And I say to my colleagues, I says, what happened here? He says, people are getting sicker. And I said, well, you know what happened? The big supermarkets came in and opened up. And I see people in there buying the stuff off the shelf, all the processed food and all the rest of it, which wasn't here before. Like 10 years ago, it wasn't even there. Unless it was produced by local people, and they do get it over there. They do understand what's going on, because it's not that long ago they were living under communism. They still are. The government there is still communist, without a doubt. But they do recognise what's going on. And we've got this big thing over here about, we're going to get Bulgarians and Romanians flooding Britain as of January the 1st this year, when the barriers come down to immigration from those countries. But the only ones that we're going to get are the ones that are going to be sent over here to cause chaos, because most of them can't afford to even get to the capital city in their own countries, never mind get on a plane and come here. But apart from Serbia, have you any experience of what's going on further east, if you like? And let's talk about the Middle East. I mean, what's going on there is standardisation of the world, isn't it? I mean, they're bombing them back into the Stone Age, so they've got to be dependent on somebody else. All those countries over there, even Afghanistan to a certain extent, was self-sufficient. And, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, they were all well-established economies. They had their own currencies. They didn't have central banks. And that's the one thing they all had in common. And surprise, surprise, as soon as the bombs start dropping, the first thing that gets erected is a central bank. And they tried to flood the countries with genetically modified seeds to, as a humanitarian effort after dropping phosphorus bombs on people. It's as you said, if something doesn't make sense, there's another reason behind it. So what do you think the Agenda 21 ideal for China is? I mean, I know they've been built up to be the policeman of the world after America's been destroyed, but what's going to happen to China down the line, do you think?
I think China is sort of the perfect corporate model for the world, and I think it's really important to see all of this as there's two distinct things that are going on, and that is the cover story and then what's really happening underneath that. So the communitarian political and social philosophy that sort of drives the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development says that the individual's rights have to be balanced with the rights of the community. And in this case, it's the global community. So your individual rights obviously are not going to weigh very much when weighed against the international community, the global community. So in terms of a corporatocracy, if you can control your population to the extent that it's done there in China, then you're way ahead. And in fact, in the United States, Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense, said that unfortunately the United States wasn't like China. He was, under George Bush. He was saying, unfortunately, the U.S. isn't like China because they have, in the U.S. we have to ask our people what they think, where in China they can just do whatever they want. But the way around that, and of course that's, this is essential to the implementation of this plan, is to give the illusion of public buy-in on these plans that are being implemented. So where China can literally, erect so-called ghost cities, which are major high-density, buildings that are, high-rise buildings, and then forcibly move their rural populations into these cities and force them to abandon their lands. That can't really be done in, supposedly can't really be done in areas where, people are tricked or, given the illusion that they have an impact on what happens politically. So, what is being done now around the world in areas that are not, dictatorships, overt dictatorships, are that people are being invited in to comment on regional plans that are being created all around the world. And, they're local. You go into your local regional plan, which is being, pushed by your local government entity, and ask what you think about it. But the reality is that the plan is designed without your input, and it's just giving you the illusion that you have some say about it. So I would say that politically, economically, socially, and spiritually, we are moving towards, we're moving towards the removal of the mask, which is total dictatorship. But the desire is not to take the mask off. if it isn't necessary, because it's easier to control a population while you maintain that illusion that people are free. And that, of course, when you teach a philosophy specifically in schools, that you create your own reality, and that everything is your fault. So, if anything's happening around you, you're the responsible party. Creating situational ethics. I think all of that plays into a situation where you're losing your control, and this ultimately is when you're living under a total dictatorship, a totalitarian state. And that's a desire that I think is openly expressed in China, because whether they're building their capacity building where they want people to be able to purchase goods that are produced there, the desire for that is is basically to enrich a group of people who are in control, rather than to create sort of a slave labor force, while also encouraging people to leave China who are able to get educations around the world. For instance, who are able to create businesses in the United States and around the world, and then bringing them back to China to develop industry in China. So I think China is the United States policy on China as far as defense goes is that China is a risk, but that if they're given everything that they want, then they won't necessarily be a risk. And I think that's a very interesting philosophy for a nation that's been so interested in bombing anybody whose resources they want into the Stone Age.
Yeah, well, of course, China's, as you said, it's been cited by the UN itself as the model state for the world. Now, I mean, if anybody wants fans to drop at the side of the street and take their girlfriend off the road because she's pregnant and give her an abortion in the back of the van, that's all well and good. But, I don't think any rational human being would want that kind of thing. But of course, going back to 1975, I know people in the UK are possibly aware of this, but there was something called the Lima Declaration. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Western governments all signed up to transport all the industry to China. And they gave all of these multinational corporations a 10-year guarantee on their losses. And Western taxpayers paid the money for them to move. And this guarantee on losses rolls over every 10 years. So these multinational corporations over there are availing of cheap labour and having their factories built for free. And before 1975, and even right up to today in the UK, Chinese students were brought over to learn engineering and the technology subjects way before there were ever any factories built in China. So we actually paid to train the engineers to go back to China, as you were saying, to work in these factories and to design them and to build them. And here we have it today. China supplies the world with cheap rubbish that doesn't work, and we keep buying it.
Yeah.
I think we had I just recently read that Chinese companies coming over here to build Chinese cars in Britain. I don't know if that's happening in America as well.
I don't know.
Yeah, I did hear that was happening in Britain. They've come over and
now our labor is cheaper than the Chinese labor, possibly.
Yeah, well, I think Jack Talley, the Millennium, winners and losers in the New World Order, I think was the subheading. And he said that in the future, the Americans would be the next boat people. And they would be escaping America to go to UK and Europe for work. But I mean, if that's the case, they better have a very good boat, and when they get here, there ain't going to be any jobs for them anywhere. So they're going to have to keep going east, I think, or go to the Pacific coast and go the other way. Yeah, I mean, as you said, about Spain and Greece, the unemployment level is about 50% in the youth, and I don't doubt it's about the same in the UK. In reality, all I've heard since Thatcher's time, I think it was up to 6 million unemployed at that time, and now we're being told there's 2.5 million unemployed. When in reality, you only have to walk into any kind of suburban area, and you'll see queues outside the job centres. well, not job centres anymore. Job centres actually used to help you here to try and find a job. But now they basically bully you into volunteering or taking any job. Doesn't matter if you're a qualified doctor, you've got to go stacking shelves in the supermarket, or you get no benefits. Simple as
and
that.
volunteering is a really essential part of this plan, because your job skills. This is what giving back. That campaign for giving back and being humble and not valuing yourself and contributing to your society. So it's about volunteerism, and people who are not willing to volunteer will be noted. In other words, if you're not volunteering or you're unwilling to volunteer your services for free, you'll be considered to be antisocial. And this is part of the drugging of our populations for people who are not fitting into what's considered to be a social model. Are antisocial or contrarian or troublemakers. The other thing is that, of course, with young people, they're being occupied by things like electronics games that are training them to essentially be sociopaths, to be emotionally responding rather than responding with their intellect. So, those are people who can be used for military purposes or for other purposes, without, the barrier of, psychological resistance. So this is something that you see, being developed in the younger, generations. And this is partly why there's such huge unemployment, because, it's simply, desirable to have these people who are, dependent on the government for money, who are being told that there's no value to their lives, and who are being told that they should be expected to work for free in volunteering. This is an essential part of this plan, is asset-based community development, where the people are the asset and they're mapped via GPS on where they are and what they're doing and what their attitudes are. This is part of the educational system as well, to map your attitudes and to then drug people who do not have sufficient attitudes to be thinking in a community-minded way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had the misfortune of having to go through that system when I moved from Ireland back to the UK, and you would sit in the queue and you would hear them, the so-called advisor, talking to people, particularly young people, that maybe you should just go down to Tesco's or Asda, Walmart in the UK, and volunteer for a month or two and see if you get a job out of it. And I would go up to the section and say, is that the best advice you can give people? Is it really the best advice you give people to work for nothing? I said, I thought you were supposed to try to help people, And they would go, oh, well, there are no jobs out here. I said, well, why are you penalising people then for not getting a job? You've just admitted there's no jobs. And I'd have this debate with them, and they had no answers to it. And they're just programmed to tell people to volunteer and work for nothing. And,
that's one other thing too, is that this destruction of the economy destroys small farms and small businesses. Obviously, you're not going to be able to, if your property has lost so much value that you can't get a loan on it, you're often not able to start a business, because people often use loans on their personal homes to start up businesses. And then you're more, you're basically working for someone else. And if you don't have a job, you're not able to get the capital together to start your own business. And, in economy, whether you're a woman, if you're a woman caring for your own children, that is not an economy. But if you're a woman caring for another woman's children and that woman is caring for your children, that's considered to be an economy. And this is what, drives these economies is a plan now by the mega corporations to use the educational system to do all their training for them. So, rather than getting an education where you maybe learn how to think, you'll be trained at sort of vocationally. And this is part of what's driving it is, then you're going to ask for it because you have so many people out of work. And you'll say, well, what is it you want us to learn how to do? We'll learn how to do it. And that's what your educational system ends up being then. It's just a handmaiden for your huge mega corporations that are using you as fodder for whatever project they want to create.
Well, of course, that takes us into Huxley's Brave New World, where you've got the alphas, the betas, the cetas, and you'll be trained for the job that they want you to do. You won't have any choice whatsoever in your career path. And a lot of really bright children going through the school system are coming under the scrutiny of the whatever label they want to put, the 11 plus test or the 12 plus test, and they test them for intellectual capacity. And if they're a bit too bright and a bit too questioning, that suddenly they've got ADHD or some other fake disease that's dreamt up by some psychiatrist, and they're carted off to the local doctor to get a dose of Ritalin to bring them back into line. And that seems to be the way it's going here in the UK. But certainly, I mean, I remember, although I might have related the story again last week, but I'll repeat myself, I apologise. But I was in a boarding school when I was 4.5 years old, and my dad was a single parent, and I was there for about five plus years or so. And when I came out, I went to the primary school. My dad remarried and all that stuff, and I went to the local primary school, which was a Catholic school again. And I was sitting there, and I'd been writing letters home and stuff, and I'd better handwriting then than I have now. And, you know, I sat there for like 2 years thinking, what am I doing here? This is just, these people are so far behind, you know. And I went on to secondary school, and we got the story of the religious education teacher was called Mr. Priestley, which immediately I thought, that's a bit strange. And he started going over the story about, you wash up on the desert island, there's shipwreck all around you, and you trawl into the jungle, and you come across a hut, you know, and you go into this hut, and the cooker's there, and the heating's on, and all that. And I immediately thought, why is the heating on a desert island, you know? And you know, it's saying, don't you think God's helping you? I'll put my hand up and say, no, somebody's been there before, sir. And I was sent off to get the belt, which is a leather strap that they wrap around your hand and made it sing a bit. So that, you know, and I just thought that's the education system in a nutshell. If you don't agree with it, you know, you're thrown out. You're some kind, you're a danger to society kind of thing for having an opinion. But going back to what you were saying about the destruction of the economy, I mean, just today, and I think it was Telegraph, well, all the mainstream papers over here, The Guardian, Mark Carney, who came over from, is it Australia or New Zealand? I can't remember where he's from. He's taken over the Bank of England, and he's apparently faced down George Osborne. Well, I think, you know, a 2-year-old child with half a modicum of intelligence could face down George Osborne and give him a lesson on economics. But Mark Carney slammed the brakes on anybody borrowing money. So going back to what you were saying about not having any equity in your house, you could actually borrow one to start a business. Well, here's another kick in the teeth for people who are in that kind of position. You can't even go to the bank now to raise any money whatsoever, even to buy a house. But of course, we're not going to be allowed to have private property under Agenda 21. Same as we're not going to be allowed for private cars. I mean, and this is another attack on home ownership.
Mm.
You know,
the home ownership. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we go back to the financial crash, and that was deliberately brought about, of course, to bring in the private landlords, the housing association, to take over houses which have been taken back by the banks because people haven't paid their mortgages, and we're going to be living in a vast rental market, and I think Holland was the experiment for that a long time ago, even before any of this stuff was on the table at the UN. And in Holland, everybody rents. They're in these little 20 or 30 square meter houses. I mean, some of them are tiny. And yeah, I had the misfortune of being a flat pack shop called IKEA. I don't know if you've got them over in America, have you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you go in there, and they're basically, they've got these huge posters on the wall. This is how you can live in your, I think it's 25 square meters a site, 25 square meter home. And they lay it all out, with your bed and your seat and everything, and your kitchen and your toilet, all in this 25 square meters. And it's basically like you could be living in a container, a shipping container. That's what it's like, you know, there's one window in the whole place. And that's the way they're driving everybody.
Yeah, that's the goal. To have, human beings are to be restricted to as small an area as possible. One thing, about living in a really highly urbanized area where you have no, or very little mobility, very little access to anything outside of that area, is that you can then be, told that we're using up nature and that there's no nature anymore and that, human beings are destroying the planet. And, if you're living on, in the, in a very highly urbanized area, you don't know that surrounding that area are just, like hundreds and maybe even thousands of miles if you're in the United States, which is, an agricultural nation. Or Europe, when you fly over Europe. I mean, these are agricultural areas that stretch for, many, many hundreds of miles. But you can believe that there's no nature left. And especially when you're considering that in order to do your part for the planet, you're going to have to live in a tiny box with, your toilet next to your bed. Because, which is, the greenest thing you can think of is a prison cell. Because, you're not going anywhere and you're living in a very small space and you're not taking up any, land. And, your food is all provided for you, your housing, your clothing. And so, this is very green. But this is not the way human beings, want to live. And this entire plan is totally anti self-determination. And, it basically tells the individual that in order to think of themselves as, having value, they have to think of themselves as part of the common good, part of the greater good, and part of the larger community. And so if you're considered to be selfish if you think about yourself as an individual. And that this is, an indicator when you're living in a very small unit. But it also produces people who are really psychopathic and sociopathic because they end up, their emotional needs are not met. And so they end up feeling that they don't care about anyone but themselves. In spite of the fact that they're putting on a face of having a great deal of concern about the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I mean that was depicted as well in 1984 with the shabby tower blocks that people were living in, run down, old, and that kind of degradation of the inner city, the urban areas where everything was crumbling, but people just had to put up with it. It's quite sad to see it. I mean, I used to collect insurance for a living a long, long, long time ago in some of the inner cities in Edinburgh. And to this day, they haven't changed a bit. The tower blocks are still there. It's still, abject poverty. And, nothing has ever changed for the better in Britain as far as I can see from all my years that I was here. I mean, I'm 50 years old now. And, I started working life at 15. In 35 years, I've never seen the UK improve one iota. It's gone backwards. I'm earning half the money I was 15 years ago. And things are twice the price. That's the way we're going. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has to be. It has to be by design. It can only be that.
I want to say something, really, that, before we end, I really want to make really clear to people that there is a worldwide nonpartisan resistance movement against this. It's all over the world. There are millions of us, and you're not going to get this information in the mainstream press because it's owned by the 5 major corporations. So if it weren't for alternative media, we would not be able to spread this information. But there is a tremendous resistance force against this. People who are refusing to cooperate, refusing to go along to get along, people who are going to their elected officials and letting them know that they are not going to cooperate, that if their elected officials do not get this information and absorb it and start to work for the people, that they're going to be removed. And this is happening. We're creating riots in government meetings all across the United States now. People are refusing to accept that their land is valueless, that they're not able to develop their property, that they can't be independent. And, it's really important to recognize that every single one of us, no matter how insignificant we think our actions are, really is having a huge impact on what's happening. We need to stop this. Mega regions are real. And our website has all of this information. I really encourage people to look at Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com and to check out my book, which is Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, because unless you have the full information, you're not going to be able to understand what's going on. The other thing that we help you with is we provide flyers. And it's one thing to know this stuff yourself, but you really need to help other people understand and find out about it. And a flyer on a doorstep is very powerful. Making 100 leaflets, and we have these flyers available on our website, so you can print them out, go to a copy maker and make 100, and then put them on doorsteps in the morning. People need to get this information, and this is a worldwide movement to resist.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and everybody's been forced into this illusion that Occupy and all the rest of it are doing great work on the streets and all the rest of it. But it's far more effective for small groups of people to go to council meetings and all these types of meetings where decisions are being made about your local area. It's far more effective for half a dozen people to gate crash those kind of meetings and be in the building, away from the police with the batons and the tasers and spoiling for a fight. It's better to just be cool, calm, collected and challenge these people face to face, because you're never going to get them. You're never going to get at them. It doesn't matter how many people are on the street. You're never going to get to the people that are making the decisions unless you actually go to where they're making those decisions and confront them face to face with cameras, with all the rest of it, and out them basically.
Yeah.
For what they are. They're just puppets of the United Nations, and nobody ever voted with the United Nations. The only people that have any interest in the United Nations are people who set it up, and that's the same bankers who are destroying our economies. So, I often say to people, why don't you just take the money out of the bank? Why do you have to bother with it? And the supermarkets, when I have the misfortune of having to go there, you see people doing the self-service stuff, and they have actually staff in the supermarkets encouraging you to use the self-service.
Yeah.
They've actually brainwashed into doing themselves out of a job.
I know, I always say that to people, like, what are you doing? You're putting me through a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little video, and I'd encourage anybody to have a look at it and show it, get it on your phone and show it to people at supermarket checkouts, because it's IBM, who of course is in charge of the whole smart grids across the planet.
Yeah.
And it's called, if you just type in IBM Shopper, and this came out, it must be 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. But it shows a guy walking around the supermarket with a big long coat, just taking stuff off the shelves and sticking it in his pocket. There's virtually nobody else in the supermarket. The only people you see are old people in wheelchairs, which I found rather interesting as well, and security staff, and they show you cameras and all the rest of it. And the guy walks through what is like one of the metal detectors at the airport on his way out, and the security guard chases him out and goes, "Excuse me, sir, you forgot your receipt." And the punchline at the end of the video is supermarket checkouts, who needs them? And I've shown that to people at supermarket checkouts who are trying to get me to go in self-service. And I've said, don't you get it? They say, oh, that'll never happen. And I'm saying, you're encouraging it to happen. You're asking me to comply with it now. And they just don't get it. I don't know what's been done to people, but they just cannot get it.
Yeah. That's interesting because IBM, of course, these are the, major mega corporations that are participating in this. Of course, they all are, but the ones that I find particularly notable and interesting are the ones that were either Nazi corporations or collaborated with the Nazis during World War II, like IBM, which made made it possible.
Holland machines. They made the Holland machines.
Yeah. Yeah. And Siemens Corporation, which is in the smart grid. They're in light rail and heavy rail, and they also own water filtering. The biggest water filtering company in the United States is owned by Siemens Corporation. They call themselves a sustainable company. Of course, IBM is in biometrics and GE. These are the major corporations that are driving this plan. Not only do they stand to make a huge amount of money, but they are part of the power, the power control, groups that are actually managing this plan. It takes a huge number of people to manage a plan this big. And one way of doing it, of course, is through biometrics and manipulation of our access to our funds. So, of course, if you're trying to get your money out of a machine, you're going to have to an ATM machine. You're going to have to look into it and put your fingers on it in order to get your money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've mentioned this on here before. Over here, the post offices are now rolling out biometric systems. So you can record your information, your retina scan, your palm print, all the rest of it, because the government is bringing in, I can't remember the exact number. I think it's over 20 departments you're going to have biometrics to access next year, including your driving license and things like that. So, and the post office, which has just been privatised over here, is they have these videos up on the site showing you how to do it, and they actually, in the videos, they're talking to you like you're a complete child.
And
just denigrating you to that kind of level of subservience and complicity in your own slavery, and it's quite remarkable. And people, and you've got to pay for it as well. So people are quite happy going to hand over money to give the biometrics over, and then they're going to try to get a driver license. Yeah.
Really, you do have to appreciate the brilliance of this plan while you're, trying to take it down, because it really is brilliant. And the joke of it, of course, is that they make you pay for it yourself, and you're losing your freedom, every minute in every possible way, but you're also going to be paying for it too. And, this is part of the plan is to, to make you just accept your subservience as being inevitable. But, we are really right at that moment now. What I like to say is that I'm sure that nobody listening to this would have, considered becoming a Nazi during World War II, that they would have never thought of themselves as being a person who would get up in the morning and put on a Nazi uniform. Everyone thinks that they would have been in the resistance. And this is the time to be in the resistance. This is the resistance. There's nothing to join. You are the resistance. You need to resist, to fight this, to refuse to go along with it, and to get this information out to people so that they are able to use that information to fight it and resist it themselves. We need to take the blinders off and be part of the resistance. And that's the only way that we can save ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and there are many people in the inverted commas truth movement. I don't like the term because there's a lot of people in there who are certainly involved in it to stop any truth coming out. But they need to look in the mirror, and instead of sitting behind a computer and just spouting off the latest conspiracy theory, because a lot of them are, you need to actually get off the backsides and as you say, start going to council meetings and challenging these people at source, and realising that if they don't, then their children, who they're looking at across the room, are going to be in grave peril in the next 5-10 years or whatever, and going to be they're actually going to be turning on the parents themselves, the same way they did in China in the 60s, because they're contaminated with old ideas.
The new human. This is the new mentality, creating the new mind. And this is creating a new social structure. And if you're adhering to the old traditional way, then you will pay for that.
Yeah, well, there was a video brought out by Greenpeace. I think it was entitled "The Angry Boy" or something like that. The guy had a little dad had a hoodie on, and he basically said he was going to turn on his parents because they destroyed their planet. And Greenpeace said, "Oh, well, it's okay. It's just meant as a kind of analogy." And that's what they did in China. But anyway, we need to kind of round it up now because we've got another host coming on in 5 minutes, and you guys need to get the stream all sorted out and stuff. But it's been a pleasure. We could have gone on to a load of different things, but it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you on again sometime.
All right. Well, thank you.
I've got just what you were saying about the flyers. I've got the actual page. It's called Be the Resistance. And there are a number of flyers there, and I would encourage anybody to go along and print some of these off. And, if you meet your local councillor or your local politician, just hand them a few of these things, and just to get a reaction and have a camera ready. And just embarrass them because they haven't a clue what they're talking about. I can assure you. I've spoken to a number of these characters on various subjects, and once you get them off the script, you just lose it completely and have to walk off. But then if you chase them down the street with a camera, it's okay. You can film these guys in a public place at their idiocy. But,
send me a copy of the video. I want to see it.
Well, in the new year we're going to start doing things like that. But we're going to start getting out and about. We've got a mobile production unit which we're going to take out and do that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully talk again in the near future.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was Rosa Corey. The website's Democrats Against Agenda 21, and if you go there, there's links to other websites there as well, and everything you really need to know about Agenda 21 is there. There's also another site called The Green Agenda, which I just tried to log on earlier on to get a quote of it, but apparently it's down again, which is quite a regular thing with that site because it has all the information there and the quotes from the elitists, as we would call them. Basically telling you what they're up to, in their own words. It's not conspiracy theory, it's fact. It's, anybody that accuses you of being a conspiracy theorist, of course, you should, retort that, well, are you a coincidence theorist? Because, everything that seems to be happening has been written about and, we've been told it's going to happen, so, there's no conspiracy about it. And, of course, the term conspiracy theory comes out there of the Soviet Union, where anybody that disagreed with the government was termed a conspiracy theorist. So there must be an awful lot of supposed conspiracy theories sitting on the opposite benches in Parliament and in Congress, for that matter, and every other pseudo-democracy on the planet. Well, we'll just go to a piece of music, and I don't know if we're going to get Killing Joke. I keep playing Killing Joke. I like them. We've been singing about this stuff a lot longer than Muse. That's for sure. Or it's going to be Gang of Four. I'm not sure. If it's Gang of Four, it's I Found Your Essence Rare, and if it's Killing Joke, it's Follow the Leaders, which of course nobody should be doing. We should be our own leaders and do our own thing.